Have you ever wondered about the recent attack on US forces in Syria? It's a question that's been making rounds as concerns around the safety of our forces in the Middle East, particularly Syria, continue to grow. Over time, these attacks have been increasing in frequency and strength, a fact made all the more unsettling by their backing from Iran. These strikes aren't random acts of violence, but calculated maneuvers with political and strategic motives. The aim? To disrupt US operations and boost the credentials of the militias involved. So what exactly transpired during the first attack on October 17th? The first attack took place on October 17th, marking a fresh wave of hostility towards American forces. The air was thick with tension, the skies over Syria filled with the ominous hum of drones and the whistle of incoming rockets. These were no ordinary weapons, but the tools of Iran-backed militias, their sights set on the American troops stationed in the Middle East. The strategic location of the attack was no coincidence. The Middle East, a region rife with conflict, was the perfect stage for these militias to play out their violent drama. The attacks were concentrated on areas where American forces were stationed, turning these places into hotbeds of conflict. The casualties from this first attack were more than just numbers. Dozens of American service members were injured, each one a stark reminder of the dangers that these forces faced on a daily basis. Yet, in the face of this aggression, the US held its fire. The decision to withhold immediate retaliation was not made lightly. It was a strategic move, a measured response aimed at avoiding further escalation. The goal was not to stoke the fires of conflict, but to douse them, to prevent a spark from turning into a raging inferno. Yet the absence of retaliation was not a sign of weakness, but of strength. It was a clear message to the militias the US would not be drawn into a senseless cycle of violence. Rather, it would choose when and where to respond, always with the aim of reducing tension and promoting peace in the region. Despite the lack of retaliation, the frequency of attacks has not dwindled. The militias continue their assaults, their actions a constant reminder of the volatile situation in the Middle East. But through it all, the American forces stand firm, their resolve unbroken in the face of adversity. Since that first incident, US forces have been targeted no less than 74 times. The frequency of these attacks has been alarming, yet the United States has maintained a strategy of non-retaliation, choosing instead to strategically decide when and where to respond, and the aim is to avoid further escalation and prevent these skirmishes from growing into a full-blown regional conflict. Yet among these subsequent attacks, there's one that stands out. The most recent assault took place on Mission Support Site Euphrates in Syria. It's notable because it was the first attack since the truce between Israel and Hamas. A single rocket was launched towards the base, but it didn't hit its mark. There were no injuries reported and no infrastructure damage either. The truce, however, is fragile. It's been extended for 6 days now, but there's a constant effort by negotiators to keep it alive and extend it further. The pause in fighting in Gaza remains tenuous, with the shadow of resumed conflict always looming. Despite the constant threat and the continued attacks on US forces, the Pentagon remains steadfast in its belief that their strategy is working. They argued that the US has been successful in deterring any escalatory actions that would expand the conflict beyond Israel and Gaza. And so, under the threat of rockets and amidst the geopolitical chess game, the US forces continue their mission, always on guard and always ready. The continued attacks on US forces have significant implications. They paint a picture of the complicated geopolitical landscape in the Middle East. For US policymakers, it's a delicate tightrope walk, balancing defensive responses to these attacks while preventing regional conflicts from escalating. The choices made here could ripple through the region, influencing relations with Iran, the fight against ISIS, and the stability of the Middle East. As these incidents continue to unfold, one thing is clear: the safety of US forces in Syria remains a pressing concern.